Different traditions will join their voices in a musical celebration March 4th at Vilna Shul on Beacon Hill. This will be the second annual Voices of Freedom concert, jointly co-sponsored by Vilna Shul and the Museum of African American History. To tell us about the collaboration is the Executive Director of Vilna Shul, Barnett Kessel. Thank you very much for being with us, Barnett.
Thank you for having me.
Before we go into the history of this concert, take us further back, at least a whole century here, to the Jewish and black communities on Beacon Hill.
Sure. So the north slope of Beacon Hill has a storied history of being really a melting pot. Around the turn of the century, there was an influx of Eastern European Jewish immigrants into the neighborhood, the North Slope and also the West End, the old West End of Boston. But they worked their way into the neighborhood that already had a deep African American community as well as Irish and Italian. So like I said, it really was a melting pot.
And talk about Vilna Shul, because people say, oh, didn't that used to be a synagogue? And wasn't something else before it was a synagogue?
Right. Thank you. So it was a fully functioning synagogue. It was basically abandoned, condemned, left for dead, saved at the last minute from becoming a parking garage, by the way, and today acts not like a synagogue, but more like a cultural center, community center, living museum. There is still a thick stream of religion that runs through the building, but we're also focused on making Jewish culture accessible to everyone, and everyone means Jewish and not Jewish, and this program is a perfect example.
Of course, you can't go into Vilna Shul without thinking of Jewish culture as a culture of immigrants, even though people, in our generation, it's not immigrant culture necessarily, but what you're looking back at is an immigrant experience. So talk about that.
Sure, and of course today it's very much in the forefront. The immigrants from Vilna, Lithuania, back then the Russian Empire, they were immigrants. Today we might call them refugees, right? And how they came to this country, originally sort of stayed together in a tight-knit group, but tried to do better for themselves and eventually move out to nicer parts of the city and then out into the suburbs. But how they interact with their new world, still proud to be from Eastern Europe, but so proud to be new Americans and have the freedom to be able to express their Judaism, their religion, their culture in comfort and safety. And then interesting how they integrate themselves into Americana. We have physically some interesting examples of sort of women's liberation so early in the women's liberation movement, if that makes sense.
No, people who grew up in America, we know a lot about the civil rights movement and Jim Crow, but if you go back to the experience of Jewish people in Eastern Europe, around the early 1900s or just before that, talk about what it was like in the Pale Settlement. I mean, the pogroms, restrictions on where you could live.
Sure. So the Pale Settlement, by definition, was this western sliver of the old Russian Empire, and that's where the Jews had to live. And the living conditions were rural, were not very comfortable, and like you mentioned, there were occasional terrible massacres or pogroms, and it's often thought of when Tsar Alexander is murdered, 1891, it's like that starts a wave of pogroms that hadn't been seen in a while, and that's sort of the unofficial start of the huge wave of Eastern European immigration that comes to North America, goes to South Africa, goes to South America, I mean, I'm a product of it, and so many others are also.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Barnett Kessel from Vilna Shul. Barnett, the other history here is the idea for this kind of a concert, and talk about your first inklings of this.
So we're doing the concert this year on Sunday, March 4th, and last year we did it around the same time, and it's deliberate to have it pretty close to the holidays of Easter and Passover, and both holidays have deep themes of freedom. And so this concert is called Voices of Freedom. And to be able to bring in three of the major religions and to do it around these two holidays that are based on freedom, and to sing songs about freedom from the three major religions. It's what the Vilna Shul was saved to do. It might not have been what the building was originally built to do, but we feel it's definitely what it was saved to do.
I look at a clip from last year's concert. This isn't some place where you're supposed to be sedate and just listen. The place was all just flowing.
Yeah, we tore it up last year. It was wonderful. So we bring in Zamir Corral, who sings beautifully music from the Jewish faith. We bring in Voices 21C, which is this diverse choir, and part of their repertoire is singing music from the Muslim faith. And then we also bring in the Boston Community Gospel Choir, which has often plays with the BSO at Symphony Hall, and each group sings 3 or 4 numbers from their repertoire, and then they practice and they do 3 tunes together, and it just, as corny as it sounds, it just tears the roof off the 100-year-old building, and it's wonderful. And we had people in the audience last year come up and try to grab the mic, and successfully grab the mic and just get involved, and thankfully we were able to record a bunch of it, both in still photography and video, and this year will be hopefully the same.
Now, it's not new that there are these, old overlaps between these different traditions. You can't listen to spirituals without, hearing things from the Jewish scripture, and you have Jewish musicians who are influenced by black music.
Oh yeah, and so for us to be able to bridge that gap that a lot of people know about, a lot of people don't know about. Some people remember, some people have forgotten. But to sort of put a stake in the ground and say, these 2 cultures, these 3 cultures, they're so important. If we can build connections through music, through an event in our building, like I said, it's what the building was rescued to do.
What about doing it at this time? I mean, I can't imagine that people was just trying to save the Vilna Shul, maybe it was 20 years ago, that they would have foreseen that we'd be in, 2018 the way we're experiencing right now.
Right. I mean, the history that we're writing today couldn't be more of a direct line to what we're trying to do today. But like you mentioned, did they think when they rescued the building that we would be having a concert like this in the building? I hope so. I hope so. I think originally the building was rescued for the thought of it being a museum, and it certainly is a museum, but we've learned that that's not enough, and to open it up as a convener of community, open it up as a producer, if you don't mind me saying, a producer of art and culture events like this. And just to be able, we're certainly not starting a dialogue, but we're adding to an existing dialogue, and it's so important. And you might think I'm crazy, but I often think of the voices of the original founders that built the building, that put the cornerstone down in 1919, and what would they think today about a program like this? And most of those voices are thrilled that out of the over 20 synagogues that were in this neighborhood, this little 4-acre sliver of Boston neighborhood, out of the 20 some odd, this is the last one left. Take a wider view and look at over 50 synagogues from this storied Eastern European immigrant time period. They're all gone. They all used to be here, and they're all gone except for this one. So I have even all of those voices talking to me in my head saying, the building is alive, and the building is building connections and building culture, for reaching back to the past, doing something today, and building for the future.
We should mention the exact time of the concert on the 4th?
4 p.m. And we're going to get started right away, and we go 100 miles an hour.
And if people need tickets, I think you've got something on Facebook or the web.
Facebook and of course on our website, vilnashul.org. So it's just VILNASHUL.org, and then from there you can you can see a direct link from the front page, or you can drill down through our programs.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Bernadette Kessel from Vilna Shul.